Now, one of them is deadlock prevention. Now, what are the methods through which we can prevent this deadlocks? Now, as we discussed earlier, okay, there are 4 states. If all the 4 states are there, only then the deadlock will occur. Mutual exclusion, hold and wait, circular wait, all sort of conditions are there through which we say okay, in case all these 4 conditions are there, deadlock will be occurring. Now, in case I restrain the way request can be made. Now, we just think of either of if either of this condition is not there, I can prevent the deadlock there, maybe mutual exclusion. What we have got, it is not required for a shareable resource, that is what we discussed, and it must hold for a non shareable resources there. Now, hold and wait, there is another state through which deadlocks were occurring. Now, what we can do is we must guarantee that whenever a process requests a resource, it does not hold any other resource. Let us say what we want to say is that the moment I request for a resource, I will not be holding any other resource which is being held by the processes there. Or another is the moment I start the process, I allocate all the resources to it. At what stage it requires those sort of resources, I am not bothered. But what I do is, let us say the moment a process starts, P1 starts, it requires a printer, it requires a tape drive, it requires some memory, I allocate at the same time only. That is what we call as we allocated all the resources before it begins its execution, or allow the process to request a resource only when the process has none. These are similar conditions only. Okay, before I start with the process, I must be allocating all the resources to that particular process there. Maybe what can be the problem in this case? There may be low resource utilization in this particular case. What will happen? Let us say I got a process, it has to print one line at the end of the job, and my job will take around 30 minutes. What is it doing? It is holding this particular resource for 30 minutes without making utilization of that. That is why we say it is a very poor utilization of the resource which will be there, and there may be starvation possible. How does starvation takes place in this particular case? Let us say my job is very printer intensive, my total resources available to me are 5 printers, and my process requires 4 printers for the execution purposes. What will happen? Let us say if there is a 3 processes which are there, let us say each process requires 1 printer. Now, the process which requires 4 printer will not be started, because at any stage my 4 printers will not be free over there. So, this is what the problem of a starvation which will be happening in this particular scenario there, and we go for the no preemption. Now, what does this no preemption principle means? As I said, I cannot preempt the resources held by the other processes, but we would like to make certain changes into this particular thing. If there is one process which is holding some resource, it requests for the another resource which cannot be allocated. What will I do? We will be taking back all the resources from it, so that it can be given to some other processes there. That is what we say, then all resources currently being held are released. Release means it has to release all the, that is what we protocol which we have got. The moment it requests for a resource is not available, what will I do? I will take back all the resources and put it in the common pool, so that other processes can make use of the resources, and we just preempted resources are added to the list of the resources for which the process is waiting. Now, what will happen? Maybe this process is waiting, but the process resources which has been preempted from this particular process can be utilized by some other processes there, and process will restart it only when it regains all its old resources. Whatever old resources were there, once it regains all the resources there, then it will start this particular process there, and we try to stop this sort of a circular wait. What we do in this particular case is, we try to impose some sort of a ordering in this particular case. Each of the resources based on its priority, based on this resource type, we try to number it up, and allocation is also based on the numbers only. So, this way my circular wait will not be there. So, this is methods through which I can prevent the occurrence of the deadlock there, meaning thereby whatever are the 4 conditions which were there, In case I can avoid either of the condition, my deadlock will not be occurring in that particular case. Now, another method of deadlock avoidance is, in case I got a priori information that whatever the resources which I will be requiring. Now, simplest is, in case I get to know what is the maximum number of a resource I will require for a particular resource. I may not be allocating all the resources at that particular moment, but I will be holding in my resource bank, okay, these are the resources which he will be requiring, I must hold it back for my processing there. Now, my deadlock avoidance algorithm can find out that there is no circular weight in the situation there, and my resource allocation state is defined by the number of available and the allocated resources and the maximum demand of the process is there. So, this is a you can say it is a matrix where we define number of available resources, allocated resources and the maximum demand of the process which will be there. Now, when do we say it is in my system is in the safe state, okay, when processes request an available resource, system must decide if immediately allocated leave the system in a safe state. Okay, whatever resources I require, in case those are available, then I say my system is in the safe state. Now, what is the safe state means? Okay, my processes which are there, they are in some sort of a safe sequence there. Okay, the way they are executing, they will be executing in such a way that all processes goes for the in a sequence whereby each process as such can be executed over there. Now, this is what we say is a safe state. Let us say this is my sequence of execution. Now, what does it mean? Okay, if for this each P I, the resources that P I can still request can be satisfied by the currently available resources which are available plus resources held by all the processes P j. So, whatever are the earlier process, we say is the j is less than I. What does this mean? Okay, whatever are the earlier processes which are there, they are the ones who are holding the resources, and my requests can be taken care by the available resources and the resources held by that particular process there. Now, what does it mean? If P I resources need are not immediately available, then my process P I will be waiting, meaning thereby that whichever is the process which is next in the sequence will have to wait till the time all the P j's have finished their execution. And once P j is finished, then P I can have all the resources which is required by that. Then once P I terminates, maybe then P I plus 1 can start their processing there. So, this is the sequence in which my processes can be executed. Now, in this particular case, this particular sequence is very important. Okay, whether I will be executing my jobs in P 1, P 2, P n sequence or P 2, P 3, P 1 or P n sequence. My idea of this is okay, this particular resource, currently available resource plus resource held by all P j should be all the time satisfied, only then my system will remain in the safe state. Now, these are some of the basic facts which are there. If system is in the safe state, then no deadlock can occur. That is, all my processes which I wanted to execute have got all the resources which it requires for the execution, either it is being held by the earlier processes or they are available in the pool there. And next, if my system is in the unsafe state, then there is a possibility a deadlock will occur. What does it mean? My unsafe state does not mean my deadlock. Okay, there is every possibility there can be some sort of a deadlock which can occur in this sort of a state there. Now, this is the two cases which are there. One is, if my system is in the safe state, there is no deadlock which will occur, but if it is in the safe state, there is chances that my system will enter into the deadlock state. How do I avoid? Okay, we ensure that a system will never enter into a unsafe state. In case I can guarantee Okay, whatever processes I am executing, they will never enter into the unsafe state. I say I can avoid the deadlocks there. So, this is what we say it is a safe, unsafe and the deadlock state. Now, this whole area is my safe state, meaning thereby if my processes are in this particular state, then they will never enter into a deadlock. Now, this is a boundary which we say boundary of the safe and the unsafe states. Now, if it is in the safe state, it will never enter into deadlock, and this is the area where some sort of a deadlocks can occur. But occurrence of deadlock may be limited to very small area. Okay, there may be very small area where my deadlocks are occurring, but still my system is in the unsafe state. So, this is you can say graphical representation of the safe, unsafe and the deadlock state. I may be in the unsafe state, but I may not be in the deadlock state. But if I am in the deadlock state, certainly I am in the unsafe state. But if I am not in the deadlock state, it is not guaranteed that I will not be in the unsafe state. But in case I am in the safe state, it is guaranteed I will never enter into the deadlock state. Now, we have got one algorithm, we say it is a resource allocation graph algorithm. There is a claim edge, Pi has claimed this particular resource R j, indicated that process P j may request a resource R j represented by the dash line, and claim edge converts to a request when a process requests for a resource there. And once a process releases a resource, then assignment edge reconverts it to a claim edge. Okay, I will be claiming that particular resource, but I will not be allocated that particular resource there. I can claim a lot of things, but the things may not be allocated to me. This is a basic principle where we work. Now, only working principle in this case is okay, whatever are the resources I am looking for in the priori state. What is the priori state? Okay, I will be looking it for all the resources before starting the process as it is. So, this is what we have got resource allocation graph for a deadlock avoidance. Okay, there is P 2 is just claiming this sort of resources, but this sort of resources has not been allocated to him. Whereas, this is unsafe safe in a resource allocation graph, maybe this sort of a resource R 2 has been allocated to the process P 2, maybe this will lead me to the unsafe state. So, this is what we have got. Okay, this is the claim. Okay, both these processes P 2 is claiming R 2, P 1 is claiming R 2, but this is how this look like. This R 2 has been allocated to the process P 2, maybe this can lead us to some sort of a unsafe states, whereas P 1 is also claiming to for the resource R 2 which has not been allocated to him. Now, there is a very famous algorithms which we say is the banker's algorithm, maybe that is based this is based on the safe state algorithm. Okay, what are the basic principles of this? We have got a multiple instances of this particular resource. This is one of the characteristics, and each process must have a priori claim max of the maximum utilization of this sort of a resource is there. And when a process requests a resource, it may have to wait. This is what we say. Okay, the moment I request for a resource, I must wait. Okay, there is no automatic allocation of the resources to me once I look for a resources. Now, when a process gets all its resources, it must return them in a finite amount of a time. This is another very important characteristics of the resource allocation. Okay, the moment I allocate some resource to someone, that must be returned in a finite amount of a time. But what does it mean? Ke finite amount of time? Ke my process may not be held up due to suspension of some of the processes which is holding some of the resources there. Maybe let us say I allocate some resource to a process, that process goes into the suspension state indefinitely. What will happen? My resource will also be held by that particular process for the indefinite time. So, this is what we say, okay, my resources must be returned in a finite amount of time. Now, this is some of the data structure which we use for the Banker's algorithm. Okay, let us say n is the number of processes and m is the number of resource type. This is very important, and we have got a one vector which we say available. Now, this is vector of length m. What does it mean? How many resources of each type are available? We put them into the vector. Let us say this is my vector, can be printer, tape, CD. Let us say this is my vector, and this is availability is let us say 3, 2, 1. Okay, that means this many number of resources of the type printer are available, this of the type tape are available, this type of CD are available to me. And then we have got the next vector which we say is a maximum. Maximum is a n by m matrix. Now, if my max I j is equal to k, then what does it mean? That the process P I may request at most k instances of the resource type R j. That means, this is my process, this is my resource type. I can say my process as such can be max is the vector which we have got, and let us say my process is P 1 and resource type is printer. Let us say it looks for 2. So, this is what we have got the value of a k, and this is what we have got resource type, and this is what we have got a process. This is a vector which we say is the maximum, that is maximum type of resources required by each process there. So, we make for each of the processes we make this sort of a matrix there. Okay, this is a n by n, because n is the number of processes and m is the type of the resources which can be there. Now, same way we got a allocation. Again, allocation is another type of a matrix. That is my allocation I j is equal to k. That is maximum printer required by process P 1 is 2, but my allocation for P 1 for printer can be only 1. And then next matrix which we have got is that is the need matrix. Need I j is equal to k. What does it mean? Let us say I need my process, let us say I can say need P 1 and printer, let us say it is a 1. What does it mean? Okay, I have been allocated one printer and maximum printers which I required for a process are 2. So, my need is for one additional printer over there. That is, I have been allocated some resources, I need some resources, and this is the maximum which we require for a process there. So, these are some of the matrices which are there. One is what are the maximum resources available, then maximum resources which I require for a process, and then what are the resources which has been allocated to one process, and how many processes, how many resources are needed by that particular process there. So, these are some of the matrices which we make once we are to have this sort of a Banker's algorithm. Now, how do I find out my need? My need I j can be maximum I j minus allocation I j. What does it mean? Okay, corresponding to process P, process I and resource type j, my need is maximum which I require and the allocation which has been done. If I subtract them, I will get the needed resources over there. As I said, as far as the printers is concerned, let us say I require 2 printers, that is the maximum, and what has been allocated to me, let us say 1 printer, and how much more I need, let us say I need 1 more printer there. So, this is what we say is the data structure for this sort of algorithm. Now, this is what we say is a safety algorithm. Now, what we try to find out whether my state is a safe state or not. Now, we define 2 vector work and a finish, we vector of length m and n respectively, and we initialize finish with false, that is each of the processes which are there, they have not been finished, and we find I such that both finish I is false and need I is less than equal to work. And if no such I exist, that means we are over, we go to the step 4, and if it is not, we just go for the allocation there. So, this is the simple safety algorithm which we have got. If it is my required is less than equal to work, we if no such I exists, that is there is no process for which needed is less than equal to work, then we go to step 4. Okay, there is whatever is resources which are required, they are available, otherwise we just allocate that number of resources there. So, this is very simple algorithm through which my safety algorithm works. Now, how do we go for a resource request algorithm for a process P I? Because obviously, any process has to request for a resource there. Now, we say there is a request vector for the process P I. Okay. For the process P I, we have got a request vector through which we are requesting. Okay. If request I j is equal to k, then the process P I wants k instance of the resource type R j. Now, if request is less than equal to needed, we just check whether they are available or not. My requested is less than equal to needed, then I go to the next step whether they are less than equal to available there. If they are available, then we go to step 3, otherwise my process P I has to wait. What we check is my request is less than equal to needed, we say yes, it is there, then we go to the next step. Are they available whatever I request? If they are available, we go to the step 3, that is allocation, otherwise P I process will have to wait for the resources there. Now, first of all, we pretend to allocate request resources to a P I by modifying the state as follows. What we do is, we do not actually modify it, but we try to see, we try to pretend if I allocate this particular resource, what will be my state? Now, if I still remain in the same state, I allocate, but if I do not remain in the same state, I do not allocate there. That is what we do, we just make, this is what we make as a, I can call as a pretending. Available is equal to available minus request, and allocated is allocated plus request, and need is need minus request. Now, if I am in the safe state, then the resource R is allocated to the process P I. Otherwise, if it is unsafe, then P I must wait and the old resource allocation state is restored. I have got a state which is my earlier state. What I do is, if I try to allocate the resource, I try to see whether I still remain in the safe state or not. In the same state, it is fine. If I do not remain in the same state, I bring it back to the earlier state which was my safe state, and P I will have to wait in that particular situation there. So, this is what we say is an example of Banker's algorithm. Let us say there are 5 processes P naught through P 4, and there are 3 resource type A. A has got 10 instances, B has got 5 instances, C has got 7 instances. So, this is what we have got as if there are 3 processes A, B, there are 3 resources A, B, C, these are 5 processes which are there. Now, this is what we have got a allocation, maximum and available. This is what we allocate. What does it mean? I have not allocated any resource of the type A, I allocated one resource of the type B and I allocated 0 resource of the type C, and maximum it requires let us say this value and available are this. So, same way for each of them states, this is what we say is the allocation there. Okay, this is what we say is the allocation and this is what it requires at the maximum there, and maybe this is what is available to me. Now, based on this I define some sequence for P naught to P 4 through which this sort of processes can be executed. Now, this is how we define content of the matrix, need is defined maximum minus the allocated. Okay, whatever are the maximum resources required minus the allocated, this is what it forms as a matrix there. Okay, this is the need matrix. Okay, process P naught will need 7 resources of the type A and it has been allocated 0 of the type A and it requires 7 minus 0, it will give you the 7 there. So, this is how this sort of a need matrix has come. Now, this system is in the safe state, since this sort of a process, if I just work out, okay, if my state is in P 1, P 3, P 4, P 0, P 2 and P 0, if I execute in this sequence, my processes will be in the safe state there. Now, how do I find it will remain in the safe state? Okay, let us say there is a request for the resource for the process P 1, there is request 102. What does this request 102 means? Okay, for the type A I need 1 resource, for the type B 0 and for the type C I need 2 resources. Now I check request is less than equal to available. Yes, this is true. Then I just try to allocate this. Allocate, I first of all pretend if my process still remains in the safe state, I allocate, otherwise I will not allocate them. Now, if I just execute my safety algorithm, then I find out, okay, if in case I remain like this, then I will be there in the safe state. That means, I satisfy the safety requirements, but same way you can check whether in case I have got this sort of allocation, can it still be remain in the safe state, or I just go for this sort of allocation for P naught, will it remain in the same state? That will help you out in learning more. Now, how do I detect the deadlocks? That was the initial was the prevention, now is a detection. Okay, allow system to enter into deadlock state. We have got some detection algorithm and we have got some sort of a recovery schemes for that. Now, how do I detect the deadlock? It can be through the resource graph. I make use of the resource graph through which I can detect. Okay, this is what we have got as a deadlock there. So, this is what we say it is a deadlocks. Okay, either I can prevent or I can detect or I can recover from the deadlock state. Now, what we have done? Okay, we have discussed about various methods through which I can detect the deadlocks. As I said, okay, there are 4 conditions through which this sort of a deadlocks can occur. Okay, what is the necessity condition? Okay, all these 4 conditions should occur simultaneously there. So, once the deadlock has occurred, how do I detect whether the deadlock has occurred? We go over the resource graph there. Now, we just check for the condition for the deadlock to occur and we go for the resource graphs there. So, this is what we have discussed today, okay, various aspect, okay, how exactly a deadlock occurs, how can prevent and how I can avoid this sort of a deadlocks there. Thank you very much.